Northeast Weather Center student forecaster Stephen Boyle. Hope you're all having a great Thursday afternoon. We do have quite a lot that's going on right now into the north. You can see all the wintry weather that's starting to press its way into the Great Lakes and eventually into northern New England. And we got some severe weather down south as well. Again, most of this severe weather down here is not going to affect the Northeast. This will just mainly stay here. And as this line of storms will move like this and eventually move offshore, I'm not anticipating a lot in the way of severe weather here into the Northeast. I do anticipate, though, some snow and some ice and some mix into portions of northern and interior New England. So we'll have to kind of watch out for that. Some folks getting a coating of ice. Some folks may be talking about up to 6 to 10 inches of snow. So kind of interesting there, especially into your higher elevations. We also got some winter alerts going on into portions of Minnesota and northern Wisconsin. These folks could be seeing close to a foot of snow. Alright, so here is our radar imagery, and we'll again update this for you. You can kind of see there is a few heavier bands within here, but for the most part, this band is pretty light. And again, in some of those bands into your higher elevations, you might be talking about a little bit of mix or a little bit of snow. In here, all rain. Not as much severe weather, though, as was anticipated. This was supposed to be a pretty interesting severe weather outbreak. We just have this squall line here that's just moving through and basically causing these folks some problems, giving them a nice light show and some loud thunder. There is some storms popping up ahead of the front, and these are very scattered in nature. But these folks, it's due to the very warm atmosphere and the instability, and basically all these things are just sort of popping out across Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, and also portions of Alabama. Definitely a very warm air mass ahead of this. But again, we also have a little bit of a backdoor cool front that moved through, and that's what's keeping the folks basically north of this line pretty cool, especially in through New England, where we have more of an influence here from the north, and these folks are only getting into the low 50s today. New York City, lower 60s, far cry from the 70s that we had yesterday, and some of these folks are cooler, much cooler than yesterday was at this time. So definitely can tell that we had a cool front that moved on through. So that's the situation. You can see snow continuing into portions of Minnesota, also coming back out here into the Dakotas, and you can see this batch of very heavy rain, but for the most part, nothing really intense going on into these areas. Some very heavy snow, though, into northern Wisconsin, but, they're used to it up into those regions. Here's our current satellite imagery, and you can see the clearly defined low that's right here, okay? And basically, this is, you can basically pick out the warm front. Actually, what's actually going on is we actually have our kind of front here, and then we have our cool front here. Actually, it's kind of more like this. And basically, if you live on this part of the storm, especially this part of the storm, you're basically talking about snow. You can see the very intense instability down here. Eventually what's going to end up happening is we're going to get a secondary low that will form somewhere in here. As this low moves like this, we get our secondary low to form somewhere in here, and that will be coming up the coast and giving these folks rain, a very chilly rain at that, and some pretty nasty weather. Alright, so let's start off with the NAM, and this will give you a good understanding of what's the situation. Let's look at the whole United States. And basically, here's our low pressure. Okay, we are starting to see that secondary low feature forming here. And again, here are those storms. These are moving to the east. And but for the most part, this is, again, here is that secondary that's starting to form. And there it goes. Okay, it gives all of these folks up north some very heavy precip. Okay, we're talking about some very intense stuff in here. There could be even some thunder in here. Folks seeing the snow will see snow coming down at very intense rates. But if you note the time, 1 p.m. in the afternoon, that's not a very ample time to see snow. But folks who do see snow, well, guess what? You're going to be really talking about intense rates, especially into this dark blue area where there could be a little bit of dynamic cooling into those sections. But for the most part, most of us dealing with a very cold, raw rain. Definitely not a nice day tomorrow. That moves on out and things kind of get a little chilly and things start warming up ahead of our next system that is going to be moving into the plains. More snow for the Dakotas and Minnesota, which means these folks in here talking about some very intense stuff. That's the NAM. We're going to move on to the GFS. And basically, here comes our system. Okay, you can see the very intense rain. I'm anticipating about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of rain for these folks into southern New England and the Northeast. And again, these folks up in here into northern New England will be potentially talking about close to 10 inches of snow in localized areas. That moves on out, cooler air rushes in, and basically things warm up. By Monday, you can see the nice flow coming in from the south and southwest, so things warm up very nicely for these folks. But again, it's ahead of our next system. All right, here's our front, and basically we're going to start seeing storms potentially firing out ahead of this thing, and then there's going to be another low, and yeah, it could potentially be another La Junta low that forms. This kind of comes up like this, and you'll see what I mean. This basically goes into Canada. We get the front moving through. We get a La Junta low. It moves through the central parts of the country. We might be dealing with another severe weather outbreak, and this time the severe weather might reach the East Coast. A lot of weather going on. And then basically things are going to be generally going up and down as far as temperature goes, but for the most part, not a lot of very warm air. And then this storm around the 23rd is looking a little bit on the interesting side. If that can hold together and hold fruition, some folks in northern New England could be talking about a big blockbuster storm, while folks in southern New England talk about a major rainstorm, potentially some flood and rains, and there it goes. Yeah, that would be pretty interesting if that happened, and basically not a lot of warm weather coming through. So that's the GFS. Finally looking at the Euro, basically same deal. Here is that system moving through. Basically you can see, and folks were saying, oh, the Euro is wrong last week. Well, do you see what's going on now? The Euro is right. Heavy rain though, and again, temperatures are very marginal. However, again, if temperatures here tonight and into tomorrow morning were cooler, all it would have had to be is just maybe 5 degrees cooler for many locations, maybe 10 in some locations. We'd be talking about a very major snowstorm for the Northeast. But because of the pattern we're in, first of all, secondly, because it's April, not really looking at that happening. But folks, again, northern New England, some snow, and it could be pretty intense for some folks. So definitely watch out for that. But again, if you live in northern New England, most likely you don't really mind the snow because, you know, it's northern New England. What do you expect? Things start warming up on Monday, and Tuesday before we get a major front. And the Euro is pointing out, hey, there's going to be a low forming here, maybe another La Junta low. We'll have to kind of watch that. And basically, that gets ejected into the Central Plains. We get yet another, by the middle to the end of next week, we get another front. This, again, could be holding its ground as far as severe weather. Again, all the way to the coast. Look at this cool air punching eastward. That is very interesting cold air. Notice the major trough as well. That's some serious cold. So we watch that move eastward, and look at that. Remember, you have around this high, you have a clockwise flow. So basically, it's the flow around this is grabbing air from northern Canada. And actually, this whole entire thing is a high. So basically, you have all these winds coming down from Canada, and it's just a mess. It's just a mess for these folks because it's pretty chilly. The Dakotas and the northern plains are going to continue to get rocked by snow. So we'll have to kind of, again, keep our eyes peeled on that. So basically, just to give you a good understanding of the general pattern, all right, and again, we'll do one last run through. Here's our storm that moves through. All right, we get a warm up beginning of next week. We may get a brief front moving through next Wednesday before we get another major warm up potentially by next Thursday. And then we get a major squall line developing, either that or some major severe weather ahead of this front, and basically it could hold its ground. And then after that, much chillier air. For the Euro, we'll look at the surface temperatures just quickly here. We'll just quickly run through it. You can see, for the most part, these are today's highs, much chillier than this morning. The highs during the day today were much cooler than yesterday. Again, you can see those chilly conditions, the raw rains, all of that. And yeah, so basically things, and notice some of these lows during the nighttime. That's some impressive lows. Some of these lows during the night could be reaching into the teens and 20s into some areas, so that's chilly stuff. Monday, we reach near 60. For the most part, though, the warmth stays held back south of New England, so basically all these folks in here are all warm. Notice this very warm air down in Texas. And then moving on through, we will get potentially into the 60s on Tuesday here into the Northeast. Some areas near an 80, particularly in through Virginia. We may be talking about some near 70-degree weather in through southern New England on Wednesday. And then Thursday is when things might get really cranking as far as the heat goes. Notice these 70s and 80s coming quite close to southern New England. And again, all of these are 80 to 85 degree temperatures. So that's some pretty hot stuff out there. That's next Thursday. And notice how things are definitely cooling down, but this is a very muggy air mass right in here ahead of this front. Basically cold air coming down like this. You've got kind of warm air from the Gulf kind of streaming in like this. So basically very, very ripe for thunderstorms if that can hold together. So that would be sometime around the 19th, 18th, 19th that we would be seeing that, and notice the much cooler conditions. I mean, we're talking 45 to 50 degrees behind this for highs. Lows below freezing. So that's what it looks like as far as things go. As we get along through the weekend, we'll get more in depth with this potential severe weather that we could be looking at for next week. No tornadoes, but for the most part, we could be talking about some severe weather for the East Coast next Friday or Saturday. Particularly next Thursday through next Saturday is when we could be talking about some severe weather here in the East. So we'll keep you posted on that as we get closer. But for the most part, that's what it looks like. But for now, that's that's all I have. I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll be back tomorrow with another update. Take care, everyone.